it is awesome, life-changing stuff that will transform your very existence and give you control of your emotional landscape, which is huge. Because when you're talking about being a spiritual person, when you're talking about being an awesome, lovely, wonderful model of spiritual existence, it's the stuff that takes you out of that space that inhibits you from being that person. So it's the anger, it's the fear, it's the worry, it's the regret, it's the sadness, it's the stuff that you have, that you've thought you have little control over. The reality is you have ultimate control over it. It all happens in your mind, and once you learn how to use your mind and utilize the levers and buttons and whatnot in your mind, you gain control over that stuff. And you want to talk about liberation? That's exactly what all the world's wisdom traditions are talking about when they're talking about liberation or enlightenment, breaking free, the kingdom within, discovering heaven here on earth. That's exactly what they're talking about. Hey guys, how are you doing? I know it's been a little while since we put a podcast episode out, so I wanted to say hello to you, give you a teachable moment out of my regular everyday life that comes directly from the Body, Mind, Spirit 101, a little bit of a heart-tugging tale, and just give you a basic update of what's going on, because a lot of you have been sending emails and messages and whatnot, and I love you guys, and thank you for those. Let's go. Hey, welcome to the Iron Podcast, where we answer all the questions about spirituality and inner peace you ever wanted to ask. I'm your host, Sean Webb. Okay, so let's start back with a story that I told, or at least gave a Facebook update about last summer. Whitney and I and Declan like to go out and listen to music every now and then, and especially when it is outside in a park as part of a summer music series that our little town puts on. And so every Friday night, or every couple Friday nights, or once every month on a Friday night, they'll have a few bands come out and play for free in a park. And so we go and try to do that type of thing. Just grab a little picnic basket or a drive-through or something and go and sit on the lawn and listen to the music. And we were listening to a blues band this one particular afternoon. It was very nice out, a little breeze through the trees. And Declan had found a fast group of friends that he was playing with, brand new kids he didn't know before, but we were having fun throwing the ball around, and Whitney and I were a couple of the parents that were kind of helping supervise these group of kids as we played together. And there was this one little girl who kind of got attached to Declan, and they played really well together. They were very kind to each other and having a lot of fun, and they were chasing each other around and having a good time. And it got to be time to where we were going to buy ice cream for Declan, and because we had a whole group of kids there, and I thought it would be weird if we got our son ice cream and not everybody else ice cream, I wound up buying everybody ice cream, so that we wouldn't create any type of weird dynamic of, somebody got ice cream, somebody didn't get ice cream, because there were obviously multiple income levels in the group of kids. And I knew that not everybody would be able to afford ice cream. So I just went ahead and bought it for everybody. When I was handing it to this little girl that Declan had made fast friends with, out of nowhere, she blurted out, "My daddy's in jail." And it took me onto my heels for a second. I didn't know what to think or how to reply, and I tried to invent some feel-good reply, like people make mistakes, and that doesn't mean he doesn't love you or whatever because he's not around, etc. But it was like a stab through the heart. I wanted to buy that little girl the whole ice cream truck at that point, which I knew wouldn't help, but I wanted to do something more for her. And I told Whitney about it on the way home, and she reminded me that was exactly why we had signed up for fostering and adoption classes in the state of North Carolina, so that we could help kids who were in a difficult situation like that. Maybe not this girl, but other kids who may find themselves in a tough situation. And so fast forward up through a couple of months ago, and we got our license granted by the state for fostering and adoption. And one Friday afternoon, we got the call that there were 2 kids that they wanted to place with us. And we had told them we actually just wanted to dip our toe in the water and just do one, but they had a brother and a sister, and the brother was an 8-month-old baby and an older sibling. And so within 2 hours' notice, we went from being the parents of 1 child to being the effective parent of 3 children, including having a baby, being back in diapers within 2 hours' notice of after years of not having to deal with diapers. So that was interesting. But the really interesting thing that happened was when the children got there, they carried the baby in the baby car seat, and he's awesome. He's been with us for the last few months, and he went from not being able to crawl to being able to crawl, and now he's starting to talk with a lot of gibberish, like he knows what he's saying, and nobody else does, but he loves it anyway. And so that was interesting. But then behind the social worker that was carrying the baby in walked that same little girl from last summer, whose daddy was in jail, and whom I had thought I wanted to do more for. And that was pretty interesting, and shook me a little bit that, a lot of the times we look at the universe and we think, there's got to be intelligence there. There's got to be something more there that we don't necessarily have a definition of how it works. But wow, those coincidences that sometimes seem more than coincidence can certainly rock your world. And it's been great so far. The kids have gotten along pretty well. There was a honeymoon phase where it was just awesome for a week or so, and then all of a sudden, some of the issues of the little girl, who is the same age as our 5-year-old son, minus a couple of weeks, those underlying issues started to come out, and there was some adjustment phase, etc. And it's been tough for her. And today was especially tough because we went to our visitation, one of many, the same time every week. And this week, mom of the children didn't show up for the visitation. And so imagine trying to explain to a 5-year-old girl how much it's not her fault. The baby, it really didn't affect the baby that much, but it really did affect this 5-year-old girl that her mommy didn't show up for her because she thinks the world of her mommy, of course. And it literally, you could see that it tore the insides just right out of her. Now, the reason I wanted to share this with you today is because a 5-year-old girl doesn't really understand her own feelings. She can kind of identify with, if she gets sad or angry or one of the basic emotions, when she's startled or fearful about something, that, you can kind of put a word to that, or at least she can. They start to understand a little bit about their feelings, but the complex stuff, they have no clue, and they don't know where it's coming from, and they don't know how to handle it. And so this was a great moment for me to be able to use some of my own technology of being able to understand what is going on inside this little girl beyond a reasonable doubt, of using the Body, Mind, Spirit 101 and the self map to be able to identify what her probable feelings were about the situation. All the stuff that we had talked about in the Body, Mind, Spirit 101, if you need a review on that, go back, because I have another update validating the whole model in a few minutes. But go back and look at that stuff. Well, now I can see, now I can understand exactly what's going on inside this little girl by using that very model. Her sense of self includes her mom as a big portion of her sense of self. Mom is inside the core of this little girl, and everything that mom does then represents itself on that attachment map within her, right? Within her portion of her sense of self, her mom, everything that her mom does now reflects on her sense of self map from the inside. and from a subconscious point of view. So mom has now, through her actions of not showing up, told this little girl, you're not important enough for me to show up for this visitation. And so what is that on face value? Well, that's mom attacking the little girl. So now a portion of her sense of self inside of herself is now attacking herself by mom's action being such that she's not going to show up. Well, that's an attack on the little girl, saying, you're not worth it. So there's some confusion that's going to arise there, and probably a little bit of anger that's going to arise there. But also then there's a devaluation of self where she thinks, well, now mommy doesn't even think I'm good enough to show up for visitation, which is a huge devaluation, which explains the sadness, because that's a portion of her sense of self that is being devalued by something that she cares about. It's not something that she can blow off. This is mommy, a portion of her sense of self rooted deep within her own psyche that's saying, you're not worth spending time with. So now we can understand exactly where the sadness comes from and how deep and profound that sadness is going to be, even if she's not showing it on the surface, right? And so we can start to map these things out, and we can look at all the different attachments that she has to her sense of self. We can imagine the expectations that she had to talk to her mommy about the new dresses that she got this week, because we got her some new dresses, and she loves playing dress up, and that's her thing, man. She loves changing all the clothes and getting into the different dresses and stuff like that. So she's got an attachment and an expectation that she really wants to share that with her mommy that's now been destroyed. We have the expectation of being able to be the apple of mommy's eye, because up until this point, when she's made the visitations, because she doesn't have a ton of parenting skills, she tries to act like the 5-year-old is her best buddy. And so, she puts a lot of attention and a lot of focus on the little girl. And so she's losing that for this week. And now there's the uncertainty of whether mommy's going to show up again, period, for visitation, and what's going on with that. And her entire anchor to her previous life, which is her mommy, because she doesn't have a dad in the picture, the entire anchor to her previous life, mommy's house, all my stuff at mommy's house, all the things that I owned, all the toys that I have, all the stuff that's attached to her, has now temporarily at least been severed, in that mommy now is MIA. Okay? So now, rather than have to guess about what's going on in this little girl's mind, I know exactly, or can have a high degree of probability of what's going on inside this little girl's mind, to help inform me about the questions that I need to ask her to pull that stuff out so she can start talking about it and voicing it and getting a handle on it. Okay? And so now we can start to see the value of the body, mind, spirit model of understanding exactly how our emotions come to be, because this works in from babies on up through you're about to take your last breath on this planet. This is exactly how the mind works. So now we can have an informed, educated guess on what's going on inside this girl's mind, so that I can then start to pull that stuff out of her and ask her direct, pointed questions about, open-ended stuff that she can take in any direction, but pointed right in the core of what she may be dealing with. And it worked well for our lunch, our little father-daughter lunch that we had after mommy didn't show up for visitation. We talked about it, and I told her it was okay to be sad, and I told her it was okay to be a little angry and upset and confused. And we talked about, some people have challenges, and her mommy has a challenge right now that she can't, she has to take care of her own needs and her own goals and responsibilities, so that she can get back to a place where she can have her children back in her home. But it was a great learning tool for me, even in my own stuff, that I was able to look at probably what is going on inside this girl, to help her pull that stuff out and to help her talk about it. And so it was a great opportunity, and I thought I'd share that with you, that, this stuff can help you and will help you. And I'm completely convinced of all the experts that I've talked to now and all the anecdotal evidence that we've gotten back and all the number of stories that I get almost on a daily basis through email of how this stuff has helped people. This can certainly help you get your own mind in order. But it can also help you understand what's going on in the minds of other people so that you can be more compassionate and more empathetic to their situation and understand what thoughts and feelings they may be dealing with in any of their situations. Okay? You can map what their likely attachments are in their sense of self. You can map what their likely perceptions are when they're looking at things or how they're seeing things in life. If you know anything about them at all, you'll know that people typically fall into a pattern of how they think about things and how they see things. And if you use those two variables, you can understand exactly how someone is feeling without them even telling you about it. And it's amazing and it's magical. I reviewed this stuff with some of the world's most enlightened people recently, or a couple of them, and both of them said, holy crap, you're on the bleeding edge of consciousness, research, consciousness expansion, and explanation of mind. And so I thought that was really cool, because some of these folks that I look up to that have written major books, who I pour through these books to be able to someday master their explanation of this expanded consciousness and these extra doors that we can open within mind to be able to see these things kind of from a more divine perspective of how this whole meat suit works, etc., which gains us a great deal of power over how the meat suit works, and our thoughts and our feelings, and especially how the mind works, and all the things that could distract us from being a more spiritual entity. To have those folks who I have looked up to for so long, who I know as some of the top people in the world on consciousness and enlightenment, they're real, genuine masters. To have those folks say, wow, you're in places that people haven't gone yet, and you're asking the right questions about where you're going. That's really cool. That's really cool to get that type of feedback, because when you're in a seat of, hey, I found something new, or hey, I discovered something new that people haven't done yet, and you get the feedback from the master psychologists of the world who say, well, yeah, that's how it works. We need a little bit more science to prove it, but no, I can't disprove any of it. Well, when you get that, well, I can't disprove any of it message, you're like, well, that's nice to hear, but wouldn't it be awesome if we could actually prove that this is actually how it works? And then you talk to the folks on the other side of the fence, right? Then the scientifically trained, so they have science background, but they're not real lifelong scientists. They've made the transition from being scientists into being spiritual masters, and masters of mind, and masters of mindfulness and consciousness, etc. When you hear those guys say, yeah, that's how it works, that's amazing, that's awesome, it feels good in that it's a validation that I'm not delivering you guys a bunch of horse hockey or a bunch of theory that sounds good that doesn't really work over time. This stuff actually works. It's very revolutionary in its approach, in that it starts in the basis of all the world's wisdom traditions, but it employs empirically proven, peer-reviewed, published science to also then come at it from that direction to say, this is how you quell your inner demons and your inner turmoil and your pain and suffering. And this is also how you can understand the inner turmoil and the pain and suffering of others, so that you can help them do that also. So I wanted to share those two things, because that's what this book is all about, is to lay all of that out there in no uncertain terms, to say, here is the next coolest, latest, bleeding edge technology to take control of your life and make it awesome, like you've always wanted it to be. And it's proven in science that this stuff is working, and it fits with the wisdom traditions of thousands and thousands of years ago, and the secret teachings of Jesus and Muhammad and Baha'u'llah and Krishna and Lao Tzu and the Buddha. All of these messages congeal with what we're talking about here and the science behind it, And then science comes right behind and says, yeah, it's actually, this is how you quell your inner turmoil from a brain perspective, from an fMRI looking at it as we're testing you type of thing. So it's really kind of a cool place to be at the moment until the book is published. But I wanted to share that with you, that we're definitely not done here. This is the very beginning of something huge, of something life-changing for a lot of people, and for something that is going to ultimately, because it's life-changing with individuals, going to be society-changing. And I believe it is certainly a solid step on the path to world peace, because at the point where we're starting to raise children that don't necessarily need to defend their mental attachments by lobbing bombs and firing bullets anymore, all of a sudden we're not killing people over the differences that we have within the gray matter of our meat suit. So that's my mission. And I will be asking for financial support here in the near future. In fact, if you want to start now, that'd be great. I really do appreciate the funds that some of you guys have been sending in regularly. Love you. But we're going to make this big, and we're going to try to help as many people as possible as we can with it, including kids who are going to be tomorrow's leaders and tomorrow's parents. So that's going to be a big push that we make, and getting this stuff out in book format, in mobile application format, so that people can start to understand their emotional landscape and how their mind works and how their meat suit influences their daily existence. All that stuff is coming, and I'm very serious about it. So don't take the evidence of the lack of podcast episodes on a weekly basis as what's going on, because what's going on is a lot deeper and a lot more important than getting out a weekly podcast episode. Although the weekly podcast episodes are going to pick up again as soon as the book is handed off to the editors in its final form. For the meantime, send me an email. You can find the email on the website, iamspirituality.com. Sign up for the Body, Mind, Spirit 101 if you haven't already, or if you have and it's been a while, review it again. Go back through the back podcast episodes and take a look at it, because it is awesome, life-changing stuff that will transform your very existence and give you control of your emotional landscape, which is huge. Because when you're talking about being a spiritual person, when you're talking about being an awesome, lovely, wonderful model of spiritual existence, it's the stuff that takes you out of that space that inhibits you from being that person. So it's the anger, it's the fear, it's the worry, it's the regret, it's the sadness, it's the stuff that you have, that you've thought you have little control over. The reality is you have ultimate control over it. It all happens in your mind, and once you learn how to use your mind and utilize the levers and buttons and whatnot in your mind, you gain control over that stuff. And you want to talk about liberation? That's exactly what all the world's wisdom traditions are talking about when they're talking about liberation or enlightenment, breaking free, the kingdom within, discovering heaven here on earth. That's exactly what they're talking about. So I hope this message finds you guys well. I hope you guys are having a great spring and transitioning into this summer, although it's already hot. I love you guys. Talk to you soon. Peace.